Again, welcome everyone. I'm really glad that all of you found time to join us today. My name is Anna Mueller, and on behalf of the PAHA, the Polish American Historical Association, was able to support this event. And I think this collaboration and dialogue between PIASA and PAHA are at the very heart of what Professor Gromada himself fostered throughout his career. Thank you all for being here to honor him today. And what I'd like to do today, right now, is to invite Karen Majewski, the president of PAHA, to welcome you as well. And maybe after Karen, I will give you a short overview of what is planned for the next hour and a half, 2 hours. Karen.
Thank you, Anya. And yeah, I'm Karen Majewski. I'm president of the Polish American Association. And I should mention that Anya is a past president of PAHA. So many of us here knew Ted personally, professionally, and we saw the many ways that Anya has mentioned that he's contributed to the shaping of the study of Polish American immigrant history and of the organization, both of our organizations, PAHA and PIASA. For others here, this will be your introduction to Ted's work. I have to say that the very first time I presented at an academic conference was at a PAHA conference in 1996, I think, in Chicago, and Ted Gromada was president of PAHA at the time. So my very history in this organization goes back to my interaction with Ted. So, today we'll have a chance to hear from a lot of people who have worked with, lived with, and loved Ted in, different capacities. But I'll just leave you with this because I'm sure that many of you have stories to tell. That when it comes right down to it, Ted Gromada was a scholar and a gentleman.
Thank you, Karen. I hope that we are close to having Angela and Don Pienkos with us, but let me just tell you a little bit about the order of the meeting. We'll begin with remarks from Jim Pula, followed by Don and Angela Pienkos. Hopefully, they will be able to join us. Followed by Paul Knoll, and then Patrice Dombrowski. Actually, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention
It's
that
going to all be recorded too.
yes, it's all recorded.
I'm
Yes,
in it.
yes, it's all recorded. But okay, I don't think it was a question for me. So I am trying to mute everyone who is not muted. If you're not muted, please mute yourself. Um, I forgot to mention that we also are very lucky and have John Gromada with us. And I think I will ask John to speak first and then followed by Jim Pula, Angela and Don Pienkos, Paul Knoll, and finally Patrice Dombrowski. And I have formal presentations of our speakers in front of me, but I think we all know of them as historians, writers, people that write and teach about Polish and Polish American history. So I think maybe I will skip that part and maybe ask each of the presenters to say two sentences about themselves when they begin, because I think they will know what to say to introduce themselves in connection to the work of um, Professor Gromada. Uh, John, maybe we'll begin with you.
Great. Thank you very much. I'll be brief. On behalf of my family, many of whom are here on the call today, I just wanted to thank you for remembering my father and let you know just how it's impossible really to explain how important PIASA was over the life of my father. Really from an early age, when he was a young student of Oskar Halecki, PIASA became an important part of his life. And he dedicated, a large portion of his life to promoting the organization, which was a means of him to really express his great passion for Polish culture, art, and scholarship. And he saw PIASA as a very important bridge between communities, between the scholarly community in Poland and here in America. And that's, I think, what one of his great achievements was, which I've only learned really in his death, is how important it was to him to be a bridge between his communities, particularly in difficult times during the Cold War and after the Cold War, in maintaining this connection, and also in expressing the importance of Polish culture and history to America. And that's one thing that I was always impressed upon by my father, is that he was an American of Polish descent, and that the value of PIASA was as an organization in America to promote Polish history, culture, scholarship, and art. And I want to thank you, those of you who are continuing on this movement to bring Polish culture and scholarship, and bring people together to understand how valuable all this is in American history. In fact, I can speak to the person who was asking about Polish citizenship. I'm actually engaged in getting my Polish citizenship at the moment. And when I brought my father the information that I was wanting to be a Polish citizen, he's actually quite upset that I would become a Polish citizen, because he saw himself as an American, and that I would renounce my American citizenship, which I'm not doing. But he wanted me to make sure that I understood that what was valuable was to be of Polish descent in this country, and to be part of this American experiment, and how much Poland and Polish culture had to offer to America. So thank you for that. I also wanted to mention that on this Zoom also is my aunt, my father's sister, Jane Janina Kedron, who also spent many years of her life in service to the Institute, and who and still to this day, values her time at the Institute. And we speak often about how meaningful that was to her. And she and my father were both partners in promoting the Institute during its difficult transition to the 30th Street House, and really setting up a platform for this organization, from which I'm happy to see it's continuing, and that we're all happy to see that it's going to continue into the future upon the foundation that my father helped to lay for it. So again, thank you very much. We all very much appreciate your remembrance of my father.
Thank you, John. Jim, the floor is yours.
Okay, is this a good voice level for everyone?
Yes.
It's fine.
Oh, fine, okay, all right. Okay, last night I jotted down some thoughts, because it dawned on me that if I start talking about Ted, who I've known for half a century, I'll probably go all day. So I wrote these down, and I'm just going to try to read them so that I can keep more or less in the time frame. So I hope I don't bore everyone to death. It's difficult to know where to begin to discuss Ted Gromada's long, illustrious career of promoting things Polish. Limiting comments to 10 minutes or less makes the task impossible. So I decided to focus on two aspects of his many faceted activities. The first of these is something known to fewer people, yet of great importance to the promotion of Polish studies. In 1984, Governor Thomas Keene of New Jersey signed Executive Order 69, creating the Commission on East European and Captive Nation History. In doing so, he explained that, quote, representatives of the people of Eastern Europe have indicated that their history as presented in the public school curricula is often inaccurate and misleading. Therefore, it shall be the duty of the Governor's Commission to conduct a thorough study of public school curricula, including textbooks and all other pertinent materials dealing with the history of the people of Eastern Europe, various nations existing within the Soviet Union, and to examine such materials for veracity and historical accuracy. In the course of its study, the Commission shall determine whether the history of these people is fairly accurately presented in our public schools and curricula, end quote. To lead this groundbreaking initiative, the first effort of its kind in the entire nation to systematically look at secondary education, Governor Keene selected Ted Gromada, who accepted the daunting task of chairing the group pro bono. To accomplish the assignment, he directed an intensive 4-year study of the curricula of 251 schools throughout the state, along with 17 textbooks widely used for instruction in those schools. He presented the final report to the governor in 1989. In it, he noted that despite the complaints that prompted creation of the study, the resulting data found that 77% of schools actually did offer some instruction on Eastern Europe, and that 88% of courses in American history did contain references to Eastern Europe. However, Ted was much too astute a researcher in his own right to accept these numerical data as face value. Drilling down to the actual lessons, the initial surface impression faded in the light of specifics. To what exactly, Ted asked, did these seemingly numerous mentions refer? He found that in the overwhelming percentage of cases, it was apparent that the blanket term Eastern Europe, or some similar equivalent, appeared almost exclusively in relation to the two world wars and the Cold War, with the focus on Russia to the near exclusion of other nations. But if history curricula reflected little representation from Russia outside of Russia, worse still was the record of teaching non-English languages, with only a single school reporting instruction in Russian and none in any of the other East European languages. Likewise, the review of textbooks found sparse coverage of Eastern Europe, aside from Russia, but also erroneous generalizations, misleading comparisons, distortions, and other forms of inaccuracy. One geography textbook described Eastern Europe as, quote, a crazy quilt of nationalities, end quote. Another proclaimed that a, quote, large part of Eastern Europe had a culture similar to Greater Russia, end quote. A history text pronounced the area north of the Carpathian Mountains as, quote, a bewildering multitude of people, a patchwork quilt of ethnic groups scattered helter-skelter among each other, end quote. Another claimed that the, quote, people of Eastern Europe are united by a common European heritage of Roman law and Christian faith, which contradicted yet another book asserting that, quote, the culture of Constantinople served as the basis for civilizations which developed in Russia and elsewhere in Eastern Europe. End quote. All these statements are, of course, wholly inadequate, indeed completely erroneous. As was still another textbook claiming that, quote, non-Russian Eastern Europeans do not have any affinity for Russian culture, they feel more kinship with Western European culture and identify with it, end quote. When speaking of immigration to the United States, one book informed students that Poland was a new nation created, quote, from lands taken away from the defeated nations as well as Russia, end quote. This, of course, ignores the long period of Polish independence prior to the Third Partition. In its conclusions, Ted's report emphasized that inadequate and inaccurate coverage is given to the history and culture of Eastern Europe. Quote, when some limited coverage is given, its main focus is on Russia. The non-Russian nations are ignored and usually considered only as an appendix to Russian history. No one denies the importance of Russia, but one expects from textbooks is a sense of balance and proportion, end quote. Going beyond its direct charge, Ted's report included 12 specific recommendations designed to rectify the shortcomings the investigation uncovered. These included distribution of the report to local schools, boards of education, textbook publishers, and other groups in a position to influence curricula and textbook selection. A permanent group to monitor the situation into the future. Grants and other funding to support remedial actions. The establishment of pilot programs to address Eastern European themes. The development and circulation of a list of educational materials and consultants on Eastern European topics. Grants and other funding for the development of inclusive curricula. And the addition of materials on Eastern Europe to school libraries. And finally, the development of a resource center at the state-supported Rutgers University that could be accessed by any of the schools in the state. Ted's report resulted in serious efforts to include accurate information on Eastern Europe in the schools throughout New Jersey, the addition to the curriculum of elective courses on Eastern Europe, as well as schools scheduling periodic appearances by guest speakers, sponsoring conferences and exhibitions, creating Slavic student clubs, and undertaking other Slavic-related activities. This led to substantial changes in both the inclusion and accuracy of Eastern European information in school curricula and the revision of some textbooks to meet the new expectations. Further, the report and its recommendations were disseminated via the American Historical Association and other prominent organizations, leading to an influence on education about Eastern Europe in other states beyond New Jersey and even some colleges. Ted once mentioned to me some of the states and organizations that requested copies of the report, but of course I did not jot these down at the time. Nevertheless, by any measure, this was a significant and lasting contribution to the promotion and dissemination of information on Poland and Polish issues in American secondary education. The second issue I would like to address is Ted's transformational effect on the Polish Institute of Arts and Sciences. Ted joined the Institute in 1961 on the nomination of prominent Polish historian Oskar Halecki. He soon gained election to the board of directors and became an officer in 1972. He recruited me into the organization in the late 1970s and to its board shortly thereafter. Thus, I was in a position to personally observe the many fundamental changes he engineered over the years. In a very real sense, Ted was the bridge linking the founding generation of Polish-born emigre scholars with the emerging generation of post-war American-trained academics. Completely bilingual since childhood, familiar with Halecki and the other founding members, he very early recognized that the future of the Institute lay in recruiting new members, most of which must necessarily, because of the international political situation during the Cold War, come mostly from the United States and Canada. Recognizing this reality, he worked tirelessly to recruit new members from a broad spectrum of academic disciplines and national origins, including continuing outreach to young American scholars, reflecting a broad array of disciplines, as was fitting for the mission of PIASA. He also very astutely used his growing influence as PIASA's then Secretary General to organize symposia, lectures, and special programs in the New York area and at universities around the country. And recognizing the benefits to be obtained from association with other professional organizations, in 1972 he arranged for affiliation with what was then called the American Association for the Advancement of Slavic Studies. Since then, PIASA has been visible in the sessions and exhibits of that organization's national conventions every year, gaining for it considerable positive exposure, especially in its early transitional years. In those early years, annual meetings were exactly that, meetings.
Hello.
Most of the time was given over to business and other organizational meetings, with a few papers read by prominent individuals. Ted recognized that this format was often not considered serious professional event by members of other organizations. To remedy this perception, in 1978, he dramatically transformed the nature of PIASA's own annual meetings to reflect modern scholarly conferences following the academic models along the lines of the American Historical Association. There was still a required business meeting, but the heart of the program was a series of academic sessions with formal presentations culminating in an evening reception and banquet where scholars could meet one another and interact socially. At the same time, Ted continued to build bridges to other kindred organizations such as the Kosciuszko Foundation, the Polish American Historical Association, and other established groups. Through these initiatives, he effectively negotiated the potentially difficult transition from what was sometimes perceived in the United States as an insular emigre group into a modern, recognized academic organization. Along with this, as a further means of acquiring professional recognition, Ted began scheduling the annual conferences on the campuses of prominent institutions of higher education, usually with the co-sponsorship of departments or programs at reputable schools such as Fordham, American University, Georgetown, and McGill University in Canada. All of these had the added advantage of lending their own status to the Institute's conferences and its general reputation. These initiatives eventually led to PIASA's highly successful 50th Anniversary Congress at Yale in 1992 and the groundbreaking 58th Annual Meeting in Krakow, Poland, in cooperation with the Jagiellonian University and the Polska Akademia Umiejętności. As a firm believer in cultural pluralism and interethnic cooperation, Ted also made special efforts to include in many of the annual meetings and occasional programs sponsored at universities around the country presentations focusing on Jewish, Ukrainian, Czech, Slovak, Belarusian, Hispanic, Baltic, and African American topics, or comparative sessions with one or more of these groups. He also arranged for PIASA participation in various special projects, including co-sponsorship of a Sklodowska-Curie Symposium marking the 100th anniversary of the discovery of radium and polonium at Rockefeller University in 1998. Throughout its early years of existence, PIASA rented space in Manhattan, but as its membership and activities grew, and especially as its archival collections and library expanded, Ted recognized the need for larger and more permanent space. To meet this need, as early as the 1980s, he spearheaded the purchase of a 5-story townhouse in Manhattan as a permanent home for the Institute. I well remember that some people, myself included, feared that saddling PIASA with what was then a huge mortgage debt of $300,000 at a time when funds were much less plentiful than today, might be beyond the ability of PIASA to repay. Despite these fears, Ted's persistent leadership of fundraising efforts paid off the mortgage in a shorter period of time than any of us believed possible, while still, at the same time, growing the endowment. This provided PIASA with a visible physical presence in Manhattan and the security of owning its own headquarters that can then be redesigned to accommodate its growing library, archives, and need for office and meeting space. As growth in membership, the reorientation of its annual meeting and other practical daily administrative needs grew, Ted readily recognized the need for updating and revising the organization's bylaws, a task accomplished in a relatively short time with little serious opposition. Along the way, he orchestrated the subtle but very meaningful change in the organization's name from the Polish Institute of Arts and Sciences in America, its original name implying it was an extension of PAO in Krakow, to the Polish Institute of Arts and Sciences of America, implying an independent American-based institution. Then, in 1995, again with his strong support, PIASA introduced its awards program with the Halewski History Award, Malinowski Social Science Award, Lednicki Humanities Award, and the Funk Natural Sciences Award to recognize excellence in scholarship. After the collapse of communism, Poland finally made possible normal contacts with Polish academic and cultural institutions. Ted placed a priority on establishing working relationships with major Polish institutions and scholars. In 1992, he signed a formal agreement of cooperation with PAO, PIASA's original parent organization, and 3 years later dedicated a symbolic PAO station on the 14th floor of PIASA's townhouse in the presence of PAO's president. Since that time, scholarly exchanges have continued to grow, both at annual conferences and through support for the travel of individual researchers. It was through Ted's early initiatives that, in 1999, PIASA obtained the services of Stanisław Flis, a professional visiting research archivist funded by PON. Flis undertook badly needed professional review of the PIASA archives and developed a plan for future cataloging and conservation. He was followed by a series of professional archivists, who expanded on his original work. Later, this was enlarged further with an agreement whereby PIASA's important archival materials were conserved on microfilm and made available to scholars. While yet another agreement with the Biblioteca Narodowa led to the collections being listed on the internet databases Sezam and ISA, maintained by Poland's National Archives and readily accessible to researchers on the internet. In 1990, cordial relations were reestablished with the Polish Embassy in Washington, D.C., the Polish consulate generals in New York City and Chicago. Polish ambassadors and consul generals have participated in PIASA annual meetings, award presentations, and other events, and some of these have been scheduled in the consulate buildings in New York and Chicago. Foreign Minister Władysław Bartoszewski made an official visit to the Institute in 2000, where he asserted, quote, I am pleased to acknowledge that we can always count on Polish Institute's valuable experience and professionalism for our activities in the United States. To a large extent, this confidence stemmed from the tireless work of Ted Gromada. As if all of this were not enough, Ted signed an agreement that returned the valuable Potocki wine soot collection to Poland in return for receiving microfilm copies of the entire collection. This enabled a badly needed preservation of the records while making them available easily and inexpensively to researchers in both countries. Similarly, the original reel-to-reel tapes of Radio Free Europe broadcasts prepared in New York were sent to Poland's National Archives in return for CD copies of the broadcast. Clearly, no one has contributed more to the initial survival, transformation, and growth of the Polish Institute of Arts and Sciences than Thaddeus V. Gromada. Without his stalwart work and far-sighted discernment, it is not too much of a stretch to say that there might not be an institute today, or at least not one as prominent and successful in the pursuit of its mission. Thank you.
Jim, thank you so much. This was incredibly informative. And it showed us the scope of those gigantic efforts of Professor Gromada to push the discipline of the Polish and Polish American studies into the territory where it is right now, I think, and help grow PIASA. And I wanted to add here that Jim is a PIASA board member and somebody who's incredibly active and important for both PIASA and PAHA. But going back to this idea of purchasing a building for PIASA, incredible vision, right? Because I think we would all agree that it would be impossible to do it nowadays
Yeah,
in the 21st century.
$300,000 today seems like a cup of coffee. But
Exactly, exactly.
what it
Yeah.
would have been today is certainly in the millions, the equivalent of what it would have been then.
Yes, absolutely. So, and PIASA is not only a space, a site for wonderful collection that is still being worked on, and we have Iwona Flis with us, wife of late Stanisław Flis, who started working on this work. But PIASA can also host a number of events, very successful exhibit, and I'm very happy that Mariusz Bargielski, who is largely responsible for organizing the events in the PIASA headquarters, is with us today as well. Okay, I think we have Angela and Dawn with us. Angela and Dawn, if you could let us know that you are here with us. I think they may be muted. Angela and Dawn, if you may be muted, that's why we may not be able to hear you. Okay, so I think they're here with us, but I think they're muted and we can only hear them. Um, I see Patrice calling, or no? Patrice, do you want to join us right now, or you're muted as well? Patrice, you're muted.
Anya, I think you have to let her in, let them unmute because they're on the telephone.
I can't unmute them.
Oh
I
dear.
cannot unmute anybody. They have to unmute themselves. We can ask them to unmute, but we cannot. I can ask them to unmute. I cannot do it for them.
Okay.
I cannot. I don't have the power to, have them being
Okay.
heard if they don't want to be heard.
Okay. Well, try it, see if it's possible, but if not, then I don't know what we
No,
can
no,
do.
no, it's not possible. We've been trying. It's not possible. We cannot do this. They would have to press the button on their phones. Okay. So if we cannot hear from them, do we want to just maybe ask Paul, who is with us in the meantime, and we'll give them a little bit of space?
I'm happy to do that. And I do hope that it will be possible for them to join us because they have a remarkable
Yeah.
insight and perspective on Ted's accomplishments that complements very nicely that outstanding survey that Jim Pula presented. I must say, we are all in Jim's debt for that review of Ted's contribution. A word or two, perhaps, about me, since in many respects I may be, in terms of many of you who are on this particular site today, an outlier. First of all, I'm a medievalist, and that's a rare breed and a beautifully rare breed. My focus is upon the region of East Central Europe with particular attention to Poland. And I came to that with no background whatsoever in Polish history or family or tradition. Um, I was an undergraduate at a small private liberal arts college and only took one history course as an undergraduate. But in that particular history course, I wrote a paper on the activities of an educator in the 10th century who eventually became the tutor for the Emperor Otto III, whom many of you will recognize as having gone to Gniezno in the year 1000 and established with Polish representatives, particularly with Bolesław Chrobry, the structure for ecclesiastical administration. And I was very, very proud of what I knew about the ideas of Emperor Otto III. And so when I went to graduate school and I was asked to write a presentation on the from my undergraduate at the University of Colorado, S. Harrison Thompson, and he looked at it and he lifted his eyes over the draft I had presented and he said, well, this is all very interesting, but there's nothing really in here about the work of Gestor or Wozmiański or and then he mentioned a couple of other names, and I said, well, I'm sorry, I didn't include those. Let me go see what I can do. And I went off to the library, came back crestfallen in 15 minutes to inform Professor Thompson that I couldn't read any of those works. They were in a language I didn't control. And he said, well, then you may have to learn that. And so I did, and thereby I came into the world of East Central Europe and Polish history. Eventually, what came out of that was my first book on the rise of the Polish monarchy, a study of the foreign policy of Władysław Łokietek and Kazimierz Wielki in the 14th century, a volume that was given the award from the Kosciuszko Foundation for the best dissertation of the year. And I have been a long time participant in the PIASA life. And the reason why I've been a participant, and we come now all the way around on this circle, is due to Ted Gromada, because Ted Gromada was somebody who recruited people for PIASA. He was not passive in the sense of he said, well, if you want to join, that would be fine. Ted looked for people to join and he encouraged me to join. His tie to me was through his mentor, Oskar Halecki. Oskar Halecki is a name that one conjures with respect to the Polish Institute because he was its founder, along with some other members of the immigration that developed in the course of the Second World War and was for many years the guiding force in the Institute. And Oskar Halecki's works that I'll return to in a moment or two are great contributions. I was blessed by the fact that the last published work that Halecki wrote was the review that he provided for the Slavic review of my book on the rise of the Polish monarchy. And Ted's tie to Oskar Halecki was that he was effectively, he was Halecki's last doctoral student at Fordham. And from that point on, Ted was very, very much an engaged advocate for the works of Halecki and some of the things that Halecki wrote of particular importance that I'll return to in a moment. Eventually, having been recruited by Ted, I was invited to join the board of trustees for PIASA, and one of the great pleasures of my life was the 3 or sometimes 4 times a year transcontinental flight from the West Coast, where I have lived and grown up and taught for the years at the University of Southern California. That cross-country flight to New York for the meeting of PIASA, followed by which Jim Pula and I and a number of other younger members of the board would remove from the Polish Institute site and go across the street to a wonderful little bar on the side of the street and talk further about the developments of the Institute and watch over time the way in which Ted helped transform that institute. I would be remiss if I didn't recognize the contributions that Jane Kedron made over those years. I'm glad that Jim mentioned that because the actual vitality of the mechanics of the way in which the Institute functioned were deeply indebted to the work that Jane provided for us, and to have her remembered in this context, I think, is well worth doing. I want to mention 2 things. Jim has provided such a wonderful overview, but I want to mention 2 things, that one of which he mentioned briefly, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit. There are several of you I know who are on screen at this particular point that still have the little techka that was given to us for the 2000 meeting of the Polish Institute of Arts and Sciences of America by then, for our meeting in Krakow. 2000 was one of those remarkable times when once again the University of Krakow could celebrate its 500th anniversary. Krakow University had the the advantage of having been founded in 1364 and then once again in 1400 founded. And so the University of Krakow gets to celebrate centennial anniversaries twice every 100 years rather than just simply once every 100 years. And Ted arranged for the meeting of PIASA at Krakow in 2000. And it was a tremendous event in terms of the numbers of members of PIASA who were there, well over 200. participating in a series of very important sessions and um, instances where one of our members was provided was given an honorary degree by the Jagiellonian University. And that particular meeting in 2000, in many ways, I think, put PIASA on the map as not just simply a small ethnic association of emigres, but instead as a serious academic program, a serious scholarly phenomenon on the scene of um, East Central European work. And that 2000 meeting in Krakow is one of the coups that Ted pulled off. It is something that is in our collective memory as an institution and also in our personal memories for those of us, several of you here I see on the screen who were present at that particular time. The other thing I want to mention about Ted's work is that he was not just simply the last doctoral student for Oskar Halecki. He was one of the very few people whom Halecki let into his life late in his career and told Ted that what he wanted to do as his final work was to do a study of Jadwiga. And that study of Jadwiga was a work to which he devoted a tremendous amount of time in his last years. Ted had the advantage of being given the manuscript that Halecki finished shortly before his death, and that manuscript became a work that Ted felt ought to be published. And much of Ted's activity for the next decades was devoted to ensuring that that was published. I don't know whether any of you have ever seen Halecki's handwriting, but it is virtually illegible unless you are an expert in paleography. It is spiky and difficult to decipher, and the amount of time and energy that was devoted to deciphering Halecki's handwriting and getting it typed up and making it presentable for submission to university presses and to others was a labor of love that was only partially recognized by the small pittances of resources that some groups were able to provide for them. And Ted made sure that Halecki's work, Jadwiga of Anjou, was a work which eventually saw publication. It took some time, and those of you who have a copy or who have access to a copy can look at the preface that Ted provided for that work and get a sense of the extraordinary efforts that he went through to ensure that the work became publishable, that it was in the hands for review of publishers. And even though there were decisions made by some of these publishers not to bring it into print, eventually Ted was able to do that. It's a big book. It's a big book devoted to the life of a very big figure in terms of the traditions of Poland, and a crucial figure as far as Gromada and Halecki were concerned, because not just simply a young girl brought up in the courts of East Central Europe in the last decades of the 14th century, but in fact, someone who came in the eyes of Haletsky to represent a particular perception and interpretation of what Europe was all about and what the idea of European civilization was all about. You've heard people talk about this region and apply certain terms for it. Is it Eastern Europe? Well, no. Maybe yes, maybe no. Is it part of Central Europe? Well, yes, that seems to have become a term that is appropriate and widely used. But the term that Haletsky developed, East Central Europe, is a term that defines and delimits the role and the particular entities in that geographic region. It is certainly Poland and Poland-Lithuania. It also, of course, is Bohemia and the Hungarian lands. But in particular, is it the Poland-Lithuanian part of this region and the way in which this region was shaped is articulated in the text of Halevsky's work. So the efforts that Ted made, himself a scholar, though not a medievalist, the efforts that Ted made it possible for this work to be published, to be recognized as a major contribution. I had the honor of being able to review it for the Polish Review and highly recommend it as an insight into the view of Haletsky, but also the view of Ted Gromada as a student of the tradition of which he was a part, and of the tradition that was represented in the work, and which he furthered by ensuring this work saw the light of day. Thank you for the opportunity to say these few words about Ted Gromada and his contribution to PIASA, and very much appreciate being part of the Institute since I joined it in the 1970s and was able to publish my second article in the Polish Review under one of the very distinguished editors of the Polish Review in its own very important history. Thank you very much. Thank you, Anna, for asking me to participate today.
Thank you for being here with us, and thank you for this very powerful reminder that in our work and activism, we really stand on the shoulders of giants. Haletsky, Gromada, but I also Jim Pula, Paul Knoll. So we really appreciate you being here with us and leading us through all this work. I would also use this moment to maybe plug in the conferences that both PAHA and PIASA are still organizing in continuing the work that Haletsky and Gromada started. PAHA's conference is in Chicago, January 2025, and I saw Karen actually posted information about this. And PIASA conference will be in June 2026 in Łódź, Poland. And of course, all of you are invited. All the details, registrations for the PIASA conference will be available soon, or maybe it's already available. And now, since I don't think Dawn and Angela are with us, I don't see their phone number. I think they left. There is still maybe a chance that they will join us, but at this point, I don't see them. So I would like to ask Patrice Dąbrowski, who really tried very hard to help him navigate the difficulties of Zoom, but who's still with us, to say a few words.
Yes, thank you, Anya. I'm so sorry that Dawn and Angela can't be with us because I'm sure what they have is very important for us to hear. And I will hope that they will write something for the Festschrift that is being prepared or should be being prepared in the near future for Ted Gromada. Now, I remember meeting him back years ago when I was a graduate student studying Polish history, doubtless when he was PIASA's executive director in the 1990s. Ted immediately encouraged me to join PIASA, which I did. And I dare say he was PIASA's greatest booster. By the time I joined the board of directors, however, Ted was no longer president of the organization. And so I'm very glad that others have spoken about his long stint at the helm. What I would rather address is his heritage and activities related to it. Ted was a proud Pole, but also a proud Highlander. His parents were Tatra Mountain Highlanders, Górale, who emigrated to the United States. Podhale. Elementary school Ted attended in Passaic, New Jersey, taught him standard Polish, if that is not what was spoken at home. So as a child, he was likely conversant in two languages, Polish and English, both learned at school, and the Podhale dialect spoken at home. As a child, Ted was exposed to the dialect not only in spoken but also in written form. He loved to listen to his parents read the young Poland writer Kazimierz Przerwa-Tetmajer, born in the Highlands, who wrote a number of works in Highland dialect. One of these was a collection of 40 tales entitled In Rocky Podhale, Na Skalnym Podhalu. Another early favorite work was Tetmajer's Janosik Nędza Litmanowski. This was part of Tetmajer's Legend of the Tatras. And it was about the most famous 18th century Highland brigand, Juraj Janosik. The brigandist past of the Highlanders, their freedom-loving, freewheeling lifestyle have fascinated generations of Poles. Ted's immersion in a Highland life was probably as deep as one could have in Passaic, New Jersey. His father, Jan Gromada, founded a branch of the Association of Tatra Highlanders there. Evidently inspired by the Highland activist Władysław Orkan, Jan Gromada brought up his children in Highlander spirit, teaching them how to play Highland music and dance the region's dances. This seemed to be second nature to Ted and his sister Janina, as well as their children, all of whom also performed with the Tatra Highlander music and dance ensemble of Passaic, New Jersey, once again founded by their father. They even famously performed for the United States bicentennial celebration of 1976. Now, while Ted was still a teenager, he and Janina decided to publish a bilingual newsletter entitled The Tatra Eagle, Tatrzański Orzeł. And it is this unique aspect of his oeuvre that I would like to explore further. A one-of-a-kind publication, the Tatra Eagle was designed to keep Americans of Tatra Highlander extraction in touch with their roots. But not only that, it also sought to spread the news about the Highlanders' culture and its importance for Polish culture as a whole. So it was written for anyone interested in the folk culture of Podhale, descendants of Highlanders, but also Poles and Polish Americans of any stripe, as well as anyone else who might care to read it. I have not seen the earliest editions, but the issues I recall from the 21st century and the 20th century were attractive and well illustrated with a nice mix of pieces in the various languages. Here I need to underscore something that Ted was aware of and always emphasized himself, the importance of Highlander culture for Polish culture more generally. The discovery of the Tatras and Tatra Mountain Highlanders happened at a time when there was no Polish state, when Poles lived under Prussian, German, Russian, or Austrian rule. Where it was best to be a Pole varied over time, but by the 1870s, one could truly exercise one's Polishness, that is, speak Polish in public, interact with bureaucrats in one's own language, be educated in Polish, and maintain Polish traditions only under Austrian rule. This made Galicia, where the Tatra Mountains were, all that more attractive. The so-called discovery of the Tatras took place in 1873, the year that a Warsaw physician, Tytus Hałabinski, came to Zakopane. Hałabinski would popularize the Tatra Mountains as a restorative place for those who needed a vacation from city life and lowland civilization. He would also set the tone for how the mountains were climbed. For the very first Polish Alpine Club, the Tatra Society was founded in that same year, 1873. Over the next several decades, much would be done to develop Zakopane into an official high-altitude resort. So where does the highland culture that Ted promoted figure in all this? Poles from the lowlands found the folk culture of Podhale, the indigenous culture of the Tatra region, to be fascinating. They saw it up close and personal as early summer visitors stayed in Highlanders' cottages. Polish elites became enamored with the Highlanders and enchanted by their way of life. Some members of the Polish intelligentsia posited that the Highlands were the place where genuine Polish culture had been maintained, far from the foreign-inflected civilization found in the lowlands. The Highlander thus was seen as a primeval Pole, as an Ur-Pole. This discovery was all the more compelling as the feisty, freedom-loving Highlanders were a particularly artistic and creative type of Polish peasant. Again, something that Ted emphasized time and again in his publication. The discovery took place in the age of Warsaw positivism, when Polish elites were seeking to reach out to peasants, but they found lowland peasants less engaging than the Highlanders. Highland folk culture was rich, even when the Highlanders were not that well off. The Highlanders' wood carvings and penchant for decorating household items, clothing, and even the cottages themselves inspired the artist, writer, and activist Stanisław Witkiewicz to translate Highlander style into Zakopane style, a form of architecture and furnishings that built on Highlander tradition, but in a way fitting for use beyond the village. As Ted wrote, other writers and artists were likewise inspired by what they saw and heard. The Tatra stimulated Polish creativity. This was most pronounced at the fin de siècle, the period of the artistic and literary movement called Young Poland, Młoda Polska. It has been said that Young Poland was concerned with either Tatra or satanic themes, suggesting rightly that the Tatras and Highlanders were a major source of inspiration for writers such as Ted Meyer, whom I've already mentioned, and Jan Kasprowicz, just to give several names. The writer Stefan Żeromski called Zakopane the summer capital of Poland, a capital of the mind and a place where Poles felt and acted free, a place where one breathed in the fresh Highland air while also imbibing Polishness. Traditional Highlander music influenced composers like Ignacy Jan Paderewski, Karol Szymanowski, even much later Henryk Górecki and others. Also more recently, Father Józef Tischner wrote his History of Philosophy, Góral style, Historia Filozofia po góralsku. A sign of the times. In it, he underscored the value of Highland culture not for Poland alone, but for the world, given its universal human values. So you see, the folk culture of Podhale and the sublime surroundings continued to inspire long after their discovery. Ted brought this knowledge to readers of the Tatra Eagle in the hopes that the Polish Highlanders in both Poland and the United States would not only take great pride in their rich heritage, but also cultivate it. It is to the credit of Ted Gromada and his sister Janina Gromada-Kedron that Highlander culture was promoted in the Tatra Eagles for so many decades. And I haven't even mentioned the Polish-American aspect of it, which they also chronicled. The publication's run ended in 2019, some 72 years after its founding. For those interested in learning more about it, the Tatra Eagle celebrated its 65th anniversary of existence in 2012 with a publication of collected essays entitled Tatra Highlander Folk Culture in Poland and America, which I can surely recommend. All this as a professor and all the positions he held at PIASA, from member and board member through secretary general, executive director, and president. May he now rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrice. This was a wonderful presentation and highlighted different aspects of Professor Gromada's work. My internet is a little bit unstable, so I'm not sure if you can hear.
It looks like
I'm sorry, I'm back. I lost my connection. Um, I was just about to say my connection is not very stable, so I'm not sure whether you guys can hear me clearly. I just wanted to say thank you, Patrice, and now we can open the floor for some recollections. If anybody would like to say something, if anybody would like to share their memories of Professor Gromada, please unmute yourself and maybe raise your hand so we see how many people are in the room who are willing to speak. Unmute yourself and we'll be happy to hear you. Paul, yes, go ahead.
I want to call attention to participants here to something that John Gromada has included in the chat section. If you haven't read it, it's another insight into the role that Ted played with respect to the Haletsky biography of Jadwiga. And if you haven't seen the chat that he posted, it's well worth looking at. Was one of Ted's great memories and shared it with those of us who were part and parcel of the Haletsky circle and the Jadwiga circle.
Yeah, I think that I can't find the photo right now, but my father was most proud of being able to present the Jadwiga biography directly to the Pope, and I believe I have a picture of him actually putting that into the hands of the Pope, which was one of his proudest moments.
Anyone else has memories to share?
Yeah. I'm Jerry Crayson. Again, I knew him. I still know him. He's really unforgettable character. And I want to say that it was through him. Felix Gross introduced me to Ted again about a half a century ago, and he introduced me really to both organizations, the PIASA, where I became a member, with Felix Gross kind of stretching my origin in order to include me as Polish, and then also into Paha, and it was a wonderful experiences. I spent a lot of time with him in the early days. I used to go to PIASA actually quite frequently. And one of the things that I guess we haven't spoken about was his activities with community organizations and stuff in New York City. And he and I and some other people organized in the 1970s when it was a difficult time in terms of interethnic relations in New York City, a conference sponsored by PIASA in New York City, where he brought together representatives of all the major ethnic groups in New York City in order to discuss the issues of the difficulties of interethnic relations. And the Polish American group in particular was seen as a group that could do that. Mainly because so many people didn't know very much about Polish Americans. And so what we were able to do is to bring together all these high-level officials in the city. Thank you. Yeah. Anyhow, so I'll let other people speak, but I think we all have tremendous memories of him.
We have Bożenna Buda raising her hand.
Yes, hello everyone. Good morning. Dzień dobry. Just second and third, all the wonderful things that have been said about Ted. He was such a wonderful person. I met him probably 20 years ago or more when some of the conferences were held here in Washington, D.C. And my sister, Dr. Eduarda Buda like an I would go to the meetings because we felt we always needed to learn more about Poland and about everyone who was presenting such interesting topics. And inevitably, we were also encouraged by Ted to also present. And we were involved with the Friends of the John Paul II Foundation in the Washington, D.C. area at the time. So we put on a whole session about that, about what we were doing, different programs, our outreach to the college students. A lot of the information uh, was also what I received from Eva Gerard. So he was a wonderful person, a terrific scholar, very inclusive and very encouraging. So may he rest in eternal peace. Cześć jego pamięci i wieczny odpoczynek racz mu dać, Panie. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure how many of you are aware that I keep losing connection. There are people on this call who are co-hosts, so even if I'm not here, just please continue. Disregard the fact that I'm not visible. Dominic, the floor is yours.
I find it difficult to add to all the information that's been given already, but I did want to speak to his humanity, how he reached out to students. He reached out to me as a young historian. We were good friends. In fact, I called him my Batza, my head shepherd. And I'm a Gural, of course, American Gural. And I was very proud of the fact that Ted befriended me, helped me, um, nurtured my interest in not only Polish and Polish American history, but in Gural history. And this was an important part of my development as a historian. So I just wanted to say to Ted Spirit, who's out there someplace looking down on us, thank you, Taju. We love you. Thank you.
Do we have anyone else?
Okay, I would like to say something.
Yes, please.
Okay, my name is Janusz Romanski. I had very good relationship with Dr. Gromada for the number of years because at the time we cooperate as an Association of Polish American Engineers in New York City. And Dr. Gromada was very interested in our association. As a result of our cooperation, I believe in 2007, we had the engineering block during the annual meeting in Jersey City, which was one and the last, never happened again. And Dr. Gromada helped us also to make our archive in the PIASA. So that's the reason. I remember as a good person for the Polonia, very dedicated, with the very, I would say, gural character. But we like him very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Janusz. And I was told that John Bukovczyk would like to say something, but I missed his hand. I do apologize, John.
Uh, Thank you, Anna. I couldn't quite find my hand to raise in the electronic tools here, so I was just holding my hand up. Um, yeah, Ted and I were sort of the New Jersey contingent of PAHA for many years, and now I guess I'm the last of the Mohegans in a sense, in that regard. And this session brings back a flood of memories about Ted and of course also about many of the rest of you here, whom I've known for many years. But one really charming element or memory that comes back to me about Ted, and something that I suspect many of you just don't know about, and maybe not even John Gramada knows about this factoid. But for many years, I used to show a little film in my immigration and ethnic history class. And some of you may know who in the 1980s had a really prominent, widely recognized film called Hester Street. Before Hester Street, Joan Micklin Silver made a little documentary, which is a completely charming movie called The Immigrant Experience, The Long Journey. And a lot of it was filmed in Greenpoint in Brooklyn. And Jerry probably knows this area of the city pretty well. And in that film, in the little sequence in that film where this young immigrant boy is going through all this travail, and one sequence in the film depicts Ellis Island, and Ted played in this film the one of the immigration inspectors in Ellis Island. So every fall when I showed this film, I would have a little moment with Ted, wait for him to come on screen and see him as a young man in his little immigration inspector uniform. And it really is a complete kind of his complete, completely charming way that he will be forever with us in this field because this film is a classic.
Thank you, John. I had no idea. This is fascinating, and yeah, very rare information, at least for me. I think I saw Aneta Pieruk's hand being raised. I'm not sure whether she's still willing to talk, whether with my internet being unstable, I just missed something. Okay, now, do we have anyone else who would like to say something?
Ted
I would like to say
Zavistowski
something.
wants to say something. Ted Zavistowski.
Okay, perfect. Go ahead.
Yes. I have a very little story to tell. Uh, I became a member of the Polish Institute me and others to proceed and develop this effort. I'm very grateful to him.
And I think we have Ivona who would like to say something. Ivona, please.
And for my doctoral thesis, I ran a series of interviews with Dr. Gromada. And I asked him about his involvement and his experience with PIASA, because I'm writing the history of PIASA. And so my questions were always about his deeds, his activities, but his usual answer was, we did. It was always, almost always we. So I really admired that. I think it's a rare feature. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a wonderful memory. Okay. Anyone else? Do we still have voices in the room that would like to share something? I see that Jerome asked about Festschrift for Ted. I think that is in progress. Jim and Patrice, if you would like to say something about this project, it's in a very early stage, as I understand.
I guess I can step in if that's okay. Uh, we just had a meeting of the PIASA board not too long ago, in which we discussed honoring Ted with a fest trip. And Patrice and I are going to edit it. We started out by asking the people who were going to be presenting today if they were interested in joining the effort, with the idea that after this was over, we would then progress to a larger list and send out a call for people to see if they were interested in participating. I think we're envisioning this as a group of original essays, written by people, not necessarily about Ted, although that's certainly welcome, but perhaps focusing on the different facets of what he did. By that, I don't necessarily mean analyzing his work, but for example, as Patrice said, he was very heavily involved in researching Gorala. So an essay on that or on Gorala presence in the United States or something of that nature, might fit well with something honoring Ted because it also speaks to some of the work that he was doing. Patrice, do you have anything to add to that? Or?
I would just say that some of the people who have spoken today may well be interested in
Yes.
taking part, and we certainly would want to encourage you to either contact us if we would. Some of us had meant to contact some of you already, anyways, but we haven't yet done that. So please keep that in mind.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Patrice and Jim, for doing this important work. I would like to add that Paha and Karen Majewski are working on creating a panel, or maybe it's already created, that will be happening this January during Paha conference that will again be commemorating Professors Gromada's work and life. And hopefully, panel in person, during a panel in person, you won't experience any of the Zoom difficulties that I think I am struggling with today. Plus, not being able to hear from Dawn and Angela Pienkos is a loss, but hopefully they will be able to write for one of the publications that are in the planning. Karen, would you like to say anything about the panel that you're working on? Is it already on the books?
Yes, sorry. I'm at the shop and the store is open right now, so I'm zipping in and out. But yes, we do. The panel is set. So we have Ivona Fleece will be speaking, Don Pienkos, Dan Patsiga, and on behalf of the Polish Highlanders, Andrzej Tokarz from Chicago will be speaking. Anna Lakodai, who worked on the digitization of the Taczajski Orzeł, can't make it. She'll be in Poland, but Andrzej, who is collaborated with her, will be speaking about that particular part of Ted's life and work. So that's what we've got so far. I think we're pretty much set. I hope I didn't leave anybody out.
Thank you, Karen. And thank you all for being here with us. I hope I'm sure you learn a lot, and I hope we manage to do a little bit in order to show the wonderful and incredibly successful, full of achievements life of Professor Gromada. Um, I see the term "čuvaj" appearing in the messages in the text. So I think we can just end this day by saying "čuvaj" and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.